Welcome, friends. It is it's week 5, lecture 3. Oh my goodness. Means we are 1 week away from the belt exam. It is May 4th, so happy Star Trek Day. Just kidding.
Oh,
Just, just kidding. It's the Star Wars thing. No,
Harry
just kidding.
Potter.
It's Star Wars Day. I'm definitely going next week to Disneyland or Disney World with the little Star Wars thing. It's gonna be awesome.
Mhm.
But I'm not a Star Wars guy. So, well, sorry for those that are diehard Star Wars. I just thought it'd be a funny joke. Obviously
Little
it's May the 4th, so May the 4th be with you. Discussion questions are due Sunday, and you got one core assignment, which is jokes API. Cool. Wanted to do a little bit of important stuff. As a reminder, I'm out next week. So I will not be there or will not be here all week. You guys are going to have Robert. Robert is awesome. He's going to be an instructor. He's going to come in. We've met. He knows exactly what to do. And I think it's really good. I told him just to be himself, to code how he would, because I think it's really important for you guys to see how other developers develop. I mean, Gray's right in the fact that when you get jobs, you will write code. You might not push a ton of stuff to production. You're not going to write a ton of brand new code. Yes, Chris said it is Robert Ponce. You might not push a ton of stuff to code, but it is going to be a lot of problem solving. So seeing how other people think and work in code is really, really helpful just to get you familiar. So I haven't told him, like, this is how we do state, or I just said, go do how you would. And so you guys can see another instructor and how they would sort of formulate classes, how they would talk, and how they would code out their stuff, most importantly. Next week is just going to be belt prep. And so what we're going to be doing is I've got a wire frame that's going to look very, very, very similar to the belt exam. I used the same tool to build it. So it's going to physically look or visually look exactly the same because I used the same tool. That's obviously not the belt exam, but it's going to look really, really similar. And you guys are going to build that out all 3 days. You're going to start. Okay, this is what it is. Here's how Robert would approach this. You're going to start with the back end, and then you're going to build all that out. You're going to connect the front end. We're going to talk about a tool today to connect both of them, and you're going to connect them. And then you're going to have a day to kind of finish up anything that you need in order for you to have this full stack application. I did just want to give you guys a little bit because, again, I'm not going to be here. Robert will likely do this, but I just wanted to give the opportunity just to give you a little bit of expectations, what you're needing, what is expected, and some tips and tricks of mine. Really big, really important. You do not need a login and registration for a MERN exam. That is not something that is expected of you. So I had mentioned yesterday that we would talk about bcrypt, and I was wrong. We actually don't talk about that till week 7. I was thinking about it today. I was like, wait, we don't even need that. We don't talk about that till week 7. And that is whenever we do login and registration, week 7 and 8. That's when we'll talk about bcrypt, but you don't need to know bcrypt for the exam. That's why I couldn't find it yesterday on the platform. I was acting like a knucklehead. So you don't need any sort of login and registration to pass the exam. Now, if you are coming from Java or Python, then you are familiar with the belt structure to where, if you finish within 5 hours, you can do a red belt if you just do all the base functionality. If you finish within 5 hours and you do some advanced functionality, then you can get a black belt. And if you are coming from WebFund, this is all probably a little bit different, but there's 3 types of belts we can get. Black belt is the highest. It's the hardest, right? So you have to do all the functionality of the base belt of the red belt within 5 hours, and you have to do some additional functionality. Plus, you have to deploy it. So it's a little bit more than red belt is just all the base functionality within 5 hours. Now you do get 24 hours. So if you don't do it within the 5 hours, but let's say it takes you 15 hours, which is still awesome, and you get it done and everything's good to go, then you get an orange belt. The criteria for the orange belt and the red belt are the exact same, right? It just is, do you have, how fast did you get it done? If you got it within 5 hours, it's a red belt, but if it's the same exact exam, but it was done within 7 hours, then it's an orange belt. Yes, Jared, you get 24 hours from submission to deploy. I'm pretty lenient on that. Like if you run into a big issue and you need an hour more, I don't know. My job is to help you go through and deploy. So I'm okay. I'm like pretty like the Bernie Sanders of deployment and giving out credit there. Everybody gets credit if you can do it, right? If you can prove that. So obviously if you go past 2 days, I can't do that, or a day and a half, but I give a little bit of leniency there. But from 24 hours from when you submit it, then you are good to go. Now, if you are going for a black belt, you must put the code on GitHub. And the point of that is you've got to connect via GitHub. You have to SSH in and then put that on the server. If you're not going for a black belt, you do not need to put your code on GitHub. The big rule, if you hear anything from me, when you are submitting your exam, you must delete your node modules. I cannot say that. I cannot repeat that enough. If you give us an exam that have node modules, it is a huge pain. It takes up a whole bunch of time. We've got 65 of you guys to grade, and that exponentially, because we have to download everything, and it takes a lot longer. So please, 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 please make sure you delete your node modules in both your server and your client folder. It's not an automatic fail. I'm not like hardcore. I should say it, but it's not an automatic fail, but it does, just so you know, it does make our lives much more challenging. Then it honestly just delays the response time for, how quick it takes for you guys to get your exams back. So please make sure you delete your node modules. It's not a hard thing. Please, please, please. I'll make sure that in the email Robert will have, make sure you delete your node modules. What will happen is by Friday or on Friday, you will receive an exam code given that you have completed 90% of the 11 core assignments that are due. So from this week and backwards to week 1, you have to have 90% of those, which is 10 assignments. So if you haven't done 10 core assignments by the end of the day on Friday or the morning, you're not going to receive a code for this first weekend. If you get it done by the end of the day on Friday and you let Robert know, then he can send you out a code, or Gray or Paul. They all have access to that. They can send you out a code. They can just go in and check. So make sure that you are submitting stuff. But if you come in on a Saturday and you're like, oh, I just submitted all my stuff, sorry, you're gonna have to wait till Monday. So just know that, because it's not, these product managers are not part of that. No, I would encourage you guys to do product manager, but it's not part of it. So make sure that you've got 90% of these cores completed. So it's 10 out of 11 completed by next Friday. You've got up to 3 opportunities to take the exam. What that means is this is when the exam sort of window starts, right? Where on Friday, this exam window starts and you have 3 opportunities to take the exam. Now, if you get here and you don't take the exam and you don't start until Monday, I can guarantee you will not, though you have up to 3, you don't guaranteed have 3 chances, if this makes sense. You can use up to 3 opportunities until this day on Tuesday. If you wait and only use your first one and you start your first one on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday you get a fail, you don't get 2 more. You get 3 or up to 3 in this time period of next Friday, the 12th, through the 23rd. Those are the only times you can start an exam. So even if you're like, oh, well, I still have 1 more. Nope. You get up to 3 in that time period. If you don't use them, that's okay. If you use all 3, if you're going to use all 3, then they all have to be started within this time period. So I just wanted to really reiterate, if you wait until the 23rd to start your first one, don't come to me and say, oh, I've got 2 more chances. No, that's not how it works. It's on a recording now, so it's, on the ether as well. But no, that's not how it works. You have up to 3 chances. I really don't think it's going to take you 3. My entire stack, last stack, nobody took 3 exams. And I think only like a handful, like 4 out of 60 something, 4 did like a retake and then crushed it the next one. So I don't anticipate it being a struggle for you guys. But if that's the case, then you get up to 3. And again, the last day to start an exam is Tuesday, meaning that once you start it, you have 24 hours to submit it, which is Wednesday here. My tips and tricks is make sure you next weekend, now you've got a week, right? Like tell your friends, tell your partners, tell whoever, like guarantee get some time, right? Get some time to yourself to just knock this out. What I wouldn't do is start it on like 9 p.m. on Friday night and then go to bed at 11 and then try to wake up and do it, because that's just going to cause a lot more anxiety and stress. I would make sure that you've got ample time to actually start and give it. Now, obviously, time is relative to people. And so sometimes you might not have, just a free weekend. You might have a kiddo or, a partner or some other plans. Like I get that. That's life. I would just say that make sure that you've got enough time. Make sure that if you're stuck on something, use the 20-minute rule. Please, please, please use the 20-minute rule. If you get stuck on something, go for a walk or go do something. Go do push-ups or go eat a bowl of cereal. I don't know. Do something. Because it'll just sometimes going away and then coming back. You're like, oh yeah, that was pretty easy. So that would be my encouragement. I'll send you a playlist of music I like to listen to while I code. Take that for what it is. It's totally up to you if you don't want to use that. But there is lots of options for like music that I'll send you as well. But you guys can, it's not as scary. And just like Paul said, make sure that you take it quick, like early. Do not wait until this last weekend, because then it creates chaos and panic, right? If you wait until this weekend, the 20th and 21st, and let's say, because you have to remember, we've got 65 people. So if everybody waits until this weekend, I can't turn around and just grade each exam takes anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to grade, depending on, what it is. And if you guys do something really small, just know that, like I try to see if you understand the big concepts, right? We've seen, I can't spell at all. So if you accidentally have something and I know what it is and I can go in and change it, and then the rest of your code works perfectly, it might ding you a couple points, but I'm not going to fail you. That being said, when you are going to turn in your exam, especially if you've still got time left, please test your code. If you do not test it and try to create, all you're going to have to do is CRUD. So create, read, update, delete. If you can't navigate, click buttons, do what you're supposed to do, like I'm going to find that. And that's what takes, or Gray or Paul, and that's what takes a really long time. The longer we take, the shorter the longer the turnaround of exams. And so if you have to retake, it can kind of be that. So please make sure that you are testing your code. Try to see, and I will make sure that I give you a criteria of what I'm expecting. So here's what you need to do. And so kind of go through that yourself and say, did I do this? Check. Did I do this? Check. Did I do this? Check. Okay, cool. There's no way that I don't pass this exam. So let me look at the chat. Somebody said, at what point should we delete the node modules before the last push to Git? Now, if you're going for a black belt, you actually just need to send me the IP address. I actually don't download your code. If you're going to go for a black belt, I just will go to the IP address to make sure everything that works. So if you are going for that, you don't have to worry about the node modules. Just put that in your git ignore, and you will have to npm I whenever you deploy. But that's okay. So make sure that still is just in your git ignore. Some encouragement would be, I would take a screenshot when you submit. And I even had it last stack where somebody said, hey, the platform looked weird. Here was a screenshot. Here was the time, whenever they sent me the email, here's the entire screen. It was acting weird. And the platform didn't take their exam, but because I had the screenshot, I was still able to honor that time, because I can see when you started it. And though it didn't submit it, I had that email. So my encouragement is just take a screenshot of it. You don't have to send me an email. But you can totally send myself, Gray, and Paul an email and just say like, hey, this has been submitted. definitely please send us an email if you're going to go for a black belt, because if we don't know, then we're going to go in and grade your exam. And then all of a sudden, if you're like, oh, here's my IP address, and it's like, oh, okay, let me go back to this. And so just let us know, hey, this has been submitted. I am going for the black belt. And then that also tells me, like, this is a necessity if you're going for the black belt, because then your 24-hour period stops. I can't tell you the advanced functionality for the black belt, because that's part of it, right? Is that you need to be able to see stuff and go and problem solve. So unfortunately, I cannot tell you the advanced functionality for the black belt.
Wanted to kind of chime in here. So for those who, so my model is, if it does not apply, let it fly. So if it does not apply to you, don't worry about it. It's not for you. So for top 10% of students who are here, this is not for you. So you guys will more than likely go for your black belt, wear your red belts, and so on and so forth. But for those who are, you know, been on the struggle bus and you got, you know, just trying to keep up with everyone, you know, some people float in the class, meaning that like, oh, they're good, they're ahead, and other people, you know, they thinking a little bit low here, and other people are treading. So these are for those folks where I'm talking to y'all. My encouragement to you is pass the first try, just pass. Don't worry about trying to get the time in and so on and so forth. You have 2 other attempts. You have about, I think, a week and a half, of more than enough than most schools or institutions give students. It's more than enough time where you can to carve out that time. If you're struggling, if you're one of those folks who are struggling just to keep up and so on and so forth, it's okay. Take the pressure off and just pass. If it takes you the full 24 hours, I will rather see an orange belt with a 9.49 any day. Because when I get scores lower than that, I have to obviously critique and say, hey, you know, this is what's going on, and you know, you could have fixed this on the third. We want to see 100% fully working code. So if you are struggling or anything like that, take the pressure off, pass, and you're like, oh man, great, this wasn't as bad. And go for your second attempt. You know what I mean? And you feel good about yourself, like I passed and great, I don't have to worry about pass or fail. And these is for the folks who are 1 and 2 stackers. Or if you're 3 stackers, we'll talk about that later. You have the option of just taking a complete, but for those, take the pressure off. This is about knowing what you've been in class for the last, you know, 6-7 weeks now, depending on when you take the exam. So that's my, and also the smartest people don't pass, and just in a sense of like, you know, it's really about how you take the exam. We literally go over everything in class. If you're going for the black belt functionality, it's a couple of things you have to research on how to do. So that's obviously part of it, your Googling skills. But everything on the exam, Will has done 100%. If you get stuck, watch either the video that I'm going to be posting soon about debugging, well, the videos that he's going to go through CRUD. You have all of the resources to pass and do well and actually get it. So just want to encourage those who are just treading the water and just trying to keep up. And those are like, oh, I've been sinking, I'm trying to just like stay afloat. I got you. So please reach out if you need help or assistance. I've been doing study sessions. So just want to just share that encouragement and that, you know, I got you. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Thanks, Gray. 2 things from that, right? Gray's 100% right on, and I'm just going to say this, I'm recording, but it's okay, whatever, they're not going to come for me. At the end of the day, guys, the belt, if you are so stressed and so anxious about getting a red belt or black belt, and you feel like a failure if you didn't get a certain color, I promise you that is not indicative of your abilities in the future. If you're getting hired for a company, 98% of the time, they have no idea the difference between a red belt and a black belt. You can tell them it's a great thing, or an orange belt, right? So some people are just not test takers, right? My wife is way smarter than me. But test anxiety is a thing, right? And so if you're finding yourself panicking, just know that that's not indicative of what your possibilities are going to be. And it's not indicative of, you know, oh, you'll never find a job because they're going to ask you why did you get an orange belt instead of a black belt? Now, if you do have some desire to come back and maybe TA or do something like that, then a black belt is required. But yeah, give yourself some grace there, because just passing is a feat, and you know a lot more than 98% of people out there. The second thing is great to bring up something that I wanted to let you know about is if you are, it's actually second and third stackers. So if you have already taken another stack, whether that's Python or Java, and you've already taken and completed that, in order for you to pass, you just have to have one belt. So if you've already taken another course, whether it's Python or Java, and you've already gotten a belt, you do have the option to just take a complete. Now, what that means is that you actually don't have to take the exam to pass, but you will still have to do 90% of all core assignments, and you still will have to do your discussion questions. So that is an option. If this is your only stack or this is your first stack, you do have to take the exam. That's just a kind of with the state's rule. So if you've not taken another stack, or this is the only stack you're taking, you must have a passing exam in order to move forward. If you're a second or third stacker and you've already passed a stack, again, whether that's Python or Java, or you've maybe passed both already, you do have the option. You just have to email me and say, hey, I would like to take a complete. And then I'd say, okay, great. And then you don't have to take the exam. And you just move forward. Nowhere on the certificate does it say that you took a complete versus a belt. That will be something between you and anybody else. So it's totally up to you. It is just like Paul said, like you should still try and test yourself. But if you, just your life, right? If you're in a really stressful season of life and you're, and you're like, this would give me so much reprieve, maybe explore those options. And we can also talk too. If you need to figure out, is this the best route? We can chat about that. But that is an option for second and third stackers that have already taken a exam and have a passing exam. If you're a second or third stacker, well, a second stacker, because I assume third stacker, you'd have already taken at least Python. If you are a two stacker, but this is your first stack, so you would then have to take the exam. Okay. Any questions on belt stuff? Belt prep, what to expect? There was a question of what is the black belt stuff? We got in trouble for telling you guys that. So we can't tell you, unfortunately, but I will do some of the black belt stuff. I'm not going to tell you when it is, but it will be done. And Robert will do it. So it will be done. So a lot of the stuff. So if you can kind of come to lecture and watch lecture, then you'll be okay. Not many to many. Thank goodness. We don't have that in a non-relational. Any other questions on belt exam stuff? Okay. Great. I'm actually just going to, sorry, there is a question. In previous stacks, there's been an assignment that's incredibly similar to the belt exam. Do we have one? Yeah, that's going to be your product. So there's going to be two really that we give you. Product manager is going to be, if you can do product manager, you're good to go. And so is authors. Now, authors is your core assignment for week 7. So yes, MERN is unique that you have a core assignment after the belt exam, right? So in your week 7, which is not a normality. But both of these will help you. Also, I'm just blatantly honest. I make a wireframe that is a carbon copy of your exam. So that is what you will be doing next week. So if you can do authors, if you can do product manager, or you can do what Robert and you guys will do next week, you will pass the exam 100%. You might even get a black belt. And the last thing to note is if you're, sorry, I know that this is a lot. If you are not going for a black belt, the highest grade you can get is a 9.49. So you can't get it a 10 if you're in an orange belt, even though you did everything correctly. That's just because inside of our system, so it can differentiate the colors, there has to be a 9.49 buck. So if you get your grade back and you're like, oh, what did I miss points on? It's out of 10. No, you didn't. If you got a 9.49, then you got a perfect score if you're in orange or red. Obviously, if you go for a black belt, then you can get a 10. But that differentiator is what separates a black belt from a red belt. So an orange belt. So cool. I always get that. Like, what did I miss? It's like, no, you actually crushed it. It just is internally. So the highest thing you can get is 9.49 if you're going for red or orange. Okie doke. Yep. Cool. No more. Okay. So I thought let's just build off of yesterday. We've got the next 30 minutes. All we need to do is we need to do update and delete. I'm going to show you one thing called cores. And that is what we have today. And then it's really just a fielding of questions. If we get to that point, or if we need to get to that point, we'll just have a fielding of questions that you guys can ask, answer, and I can answer any questions for what you have. So just as a reminder, here's our backend, right? Here's our API, and we have modularized it in a couple different ways, right? We've got this server.js file. And then we also added in 4 different folders: our routes, our models, our controllers, and our config. Our config is what connects us to our database by using mongoose.config.js. This file connects us to our database. Our model is our blueprint for what we want or what we have, right? Within our blueprint, we say, here's the type of, here's the data type that we're going to have, right? In this case, it's string, and number. Then we can also do our validations here. Now, when we come to update, it's going to be important to note kind of that we do have validations, but here, just our validations. Now, as a reminder, if we just did something like this, this works perfectly fine. This will give us a default value or a default error if, you know, we try to submit something that's not required, or sorry, submit something without a title. It'll give us a default Mongoose error. But I am telling you on the exam, you will need to put in, I'm going to check, is there a custom error right here? So just make sure that you do that. Also here, we have max length, min length, or min length, max length. Sorry, I said those inverse. These are your validations. We're adding in timestamps is true. What this is giving us our created at and our updated at. And because we're using mongoose.schema, anytime we're using Mongoose, we have to bring in Mongoose. The last thing we're doing is we are exporting, and exporting is just allowing us to use this code in another JS file, right? So we make sure that we export this model of show and show schema, right? We call it show. This is my collection. And then we're exporting this guy. Cool. So now I can use it in other places. The other place I would use it is in my controller. I come up here and I say my const show equals require ... So I'm coming out, I'm going back to my controllers. That way I'm on the same level. Then I'm going into my models. Within my models, I'm going into show.model. Now I don't have to have the JS. That is inferred there. And so I'm saying, cool, I want to make show equal to whatever is being exported here. Well, what is being exported is my show model, right? So this guy right here. So I go, okay, great. I, again, have my exports. Now there's other ways you could do this. You could say module.exports.create show. That would work just fine. You'd have to say that for everything, but we don't like to repeat ourselves. And I think this is a little bit cleaner. So we can just create this object here. And then now all we have to do is create our different methods by just giving a name, and then its value is this, right? So here we have get all shows, takes in a request and a response. Here we're using our Mongoose, our middleware functionality of find, which gives me all of the values. If everything's okay, we have our promise here saying, hey, if everything's okay, I want you to take all of those values that you're giving back to us. Let's refer to them as all shows, and let's just respond with all shows. Let's just give that as our response. Let's give all of them. I see in chat, somebody asked, what is rec.body? Now, if you remember yesterday, and we'll test it today too. if you remember yesterday, we actually console logged what was rec. And when you make a request, you might think that we're just saying, oh, I want to go to localhost 8000/API/create or whatever the route is. But when you're actually going there, you are making a request and it gives you a whole bunch of information. And we saw that yesterday. It was a whole list of information. Well, within that information, that object, there's a key called body. The value of body is going to be what we are giving with our request. And when we are dealing with any sort of create, that is coming from our form, right? And so just like Gray is saying, if you took Python, it's just like saying request.form, but this is just request.body, right? It is a key within my request object. And what is the value of body is going to be all of my form data, all of my form material, right? Every key and every object that I have within my form, or key and value, sorry. And so what we're doing here is we're console logging, and we can show that in a bit. But with create, we're just saying, hey, I need you to create a new show. Use this information to create it, whatever is in my rec.body, which is going to have a title, a genre, and a release here. If everything goes well, then cool. It's going to give us back this new show and we'll show it. If not, there's an error, meaning that our validations didn't hit, or some sort of other error. Then we're going to say, okay, great. We have a status of 400 and we're actually going to give back the error. Okay. Now that is for create and read. And then lastly, we have get one, where we can do the same thing. Our request has a whole bunch of different keys. One of them is body. One of them is params. This params is saying within this request, there's a parameter or some sort of specific value that we're going to call, that we called ID. So if I bring this side by side, I think Teresa asked for this yesterday, and I think that was super helpful. We're passing in this parameter ID. And so within my request, we're saying, hey, I want to grab that information. And then what we're running is the method of find by ID. And again, what it's doing is it's going into my show collection and saying, all right, let's find by ID. Mongoose does the heavy lifting. Let's give it the ID we want it to find by. If everything works out, then it's great. I have the show that you requested. And we say, now just go ahead and respond in JSON with that show. If not, like, oh, we can't find it, or that ID doesn't match anything, then we get the error and we are able to visualize the error. Now, the last thing we did was we added this routes, the show.routes. Again, we bring in the controller. I want to be able to have access to my methodology, my methods. And so here I say show controller dot get all shows, show controller dot create show, show controller dot get one show. So whenever the route finds the specific route that's requested, it's going to say, okay, I found it. Now, what do you want me to do? Go into show controller. And then I want you to run get one show, or I want to get that value that we have. And I want to run that. I want to do that sort of information. It sounded like somebody was talking, but I'm not sure if they were. Okay. So there's two more things we need to do. We need to finish our CRUD, right? And you're going to have to read one. You're going to have to read all. You're going to have to create. Those are all going to be part of your belt exam. You're also going to have to be able to grab some information and update it. Say, hey, I've got a form. I want to update this specific value. And then you're going to have to delete, right? So all of these, you're going to have to do every single one of these functions. You're not going to have to do anything more than that. but you are going to have to be able to do these. So I wanted to make sure, obviously, that we do that for you. So,
Well, may I have you a question? May I ask you a question?
sure. What's up?
Sorry. What is the 400 in create? Can you just tell me one
Yeah,
more
so
time?
I'm not going to go through that right now, but there's different status codes that you can do. Maybe next week, I can ask Robert to kind of go through that. But there are different status codes that we can have, right? And so within create, this is just a status code that we can give it.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe if we have some time after this or at the end of class, we can go through status codes. It's not super necessary. You don't even have to do that. You could just say res.json error, and that would have worked just fine too. We can just do this if that's confused, because I saw somebody else in the chat having that. We can just do that. I think Copilot put that in, but there's just different status codes that you can have whenever you get specific errors, because then it allows us to kind of handle our errors differently, right? And say like, okay,
Mhm.
if there's an error, this is what I want you to do. Or if I receive this code, this is what this is doing. So we can sort of manage that way, but we don't need to have it right now. It's not mandatory. It's not something that you're gonna have to do. Yeah, Gray always uses status code. So maybe next week, Gray, Paul, on Wednesday, maybe you guys can go through status codes in the office hour. That'd probably be really helpful. Thank you, Michael. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the chat too to kind of talk through that. Again, not super necessary. It can help. It can help when you're debugging if you have some error, but for right now, not super necessary. Great question.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Cool. So let's go ahead and let's deal with this update. So I'm just going to create an update show. And this is going to take in a request and response, right? Now, when we're doing this, if we're thinking about the logic, what are we really going to have to do when we're going to update? What is some logic? What are some things? Let's think about what we have to do. And you guys come off mute. What do you need to do? What do you need to have access to in order to update something?
The ID.
Yeah, the ID. So we know that we're going to need to pass in our route. We're going to need to probably have that access to that ID. What else are we going to need?
Probably the values of the fields you're going to update.
Yeah. And the new values, right? Those are really the two main things. Is we want to have the idea of what we need to update. And then we want to go ahead and actually update, right? So then, or the values that we want to update, and then we pass that through. So what I can do is I can say show dot, and I'm going to grab find by ID and update. Now, I think this is the one that is the most, like the most up to date within Mongoose. That's why. So, because I think there's like find and update, or there's like just an update one, but they're really trying to hammer in this find by ID. So we'll do that, find by ID and update. I think the platform does it a little bit different. But in order for us to, I'm going to go ahead. Sorry, Teresa, I'm going to take this off for right now. In order for us to do this, we need exactly what Tony was saying, right? We're going to assume, similar to us getting one, we're going to need to go in and grab the specific document that we want to update, right? We also need to give it the values of what we want to update. And then what these are doing is sorry. What will happen if we're reading this? It says by default, so there's two extra things that you can add in. So by default, find one and update, which is the old version, right? Returns a document as it was before you update. So if we are returning, remember when we're getting this response and we're getting our show, if we do it sort of the old way, then what we would do is it would give us the old one back. So sometimes this happens in like other languages. If you're deleting, the response back is whatever you just deleted, right? So in this case, the response back is the old value, but we might not want to show that. We might want to show our new value, right? So what I can do is I can say new is true. And what that's going to do is now that's going to give me the updated version. So it's going to apply the update, and then the response is going to be that newly updated values or the newly updated document. The second thing we can do, and this is cough, cough, probably going to be on your exam. By probably, I mean it will be, is we can set run validators to true. And what that means is before we update, it's going to go into our model and say, okay, if it's in our database, we know that it passed our validations. But we want to make sure that people don't, create something that passes our validations and then go and update to something that no longer passes, to where it's just one letter or it's 5,000 letters, right? Or characters. And so what we can do in this show controller is say, hey, I want you to also go ahead and run the validators. And so what it will do is whenever it's updating, it's going to go into each field and say, does the value that's given in my request body, do those pass the validations that I have? Do those pass the validations that I have? If that's the case, then we have our updated show. And again, because we have new is true, this is the fully updated show. And we just respond with that. Else, we've got our catch, and then we give back our error. And that's it. That's all that the edit is. We're going in, we're having a piece of information of our ID. So we have to know which one we want to update. We also have to give the information of what we want to update it with, right? We can say new is true, meaning your response needs to be this newly updated value. And before you update, I want to make sure that it's valid. I want to make sure that it follows all of my validations and everything is good to go. If you hit this and everything is good to go, well, cool. Give me my updated show, or else let's go ahead and have an error. Any questions on this guy?
I have a question on the new part.
Mhm.
So if it's just like, input your name, if your information I'm editing is the name,
Mhm.
and we don't have the new true section. Does that mean, like, if I have my name set to Jeff and then I update it to Cameron, the response it will get without the new true will be Jeff?
Yep, exactly. Exactly. Like in Python, I don't know, Cameron, if you took Python or if anybody took Python, whenever you deleted something, if you were to actually console log or set that equal like X equals delete, it would give you back the ID of whatever was just deleted. Right? That's just the response. That's the way it works. So here, same sort of thing. This gives you back the information. So if you wanted to have something, it's like, cool, you've updated, you changed it from Jeff, right? And then now you show the new information to blank, then you would want to like deal with that and not have that as true, right? You just wouldn't put that there because by default it's false. But this allows and says, yes, exactly like what you're saying. If you're now wanting to, let's think of if somebody goes and updates their name on Facebook from Jeff to Cameron. And once they click update, we want to route them to maybe their page. Well, we want that new information, or we want to be able to pass in that information if we wanted to do something else with it. So we want that new information. We don't want that old deprecated information. So that's what this is doing. So Tony said, what happens to the fields that aren't updated? Nothing. So there's two ways that we can do it. And we'll talk about, there's put and patch. Either we're going to update everything, or we just update the ones. We just update the ones that we want. I believe what it would give back is the entire show object regardless. And so what it would do is it would give back the old show object with the non-updated versions or non-updated fields. But if you didn't edit it, like if you use like a patch and you didn't edit it, then it would still give you that, it'd just give you the old object. Cool. Now, same sort of idea with delete. It's fairly simple. Same thing. If I'm going to delete my show, first and foremost, I just need to know, what am I deleting? Right? So I'm going to find by ID and delete. The only thing I need is my ID. Then if that's the case, we're good to go. We have this value. This is what it returns. Yes, this was deleted. Or, hey, there was an error. I couldn't, this ID doesn't match anything we have or something, of the nature. Delete's pretty straightforward. All you have to do is find the ID and then you're good to go. Yeah, it's way less work than Flask. Okay. So because I've changed my controllers, what do I now need to change? My model's good to go.
Routes.
My routes, exactly. So let's go ahead and move these side by side. I've already handled my create show. Perfect. I've already handled my get all shows, handled my get one show. So let's go in and do my app.get. Now there's two ways that I can do it. I can do a put. So if I do it this way, app.put, let me get this different there. If I do app.put, put is an HTTP method verb, that allows me to edit. But if I do that, I must give all the values. I must update all the values, meaning that if I just want to change one field, I still have to give the entire object. But I have to get all the older information and then give the entire object. Put changes everything. There's the other version. So I'm just going to say changes. Oops, sorry. Changes all values in the DB to match the rec dot body, right? So whatever we're giving it, it just updates the entire object. And then, but the other one is patch. So I can do show controller, silly goose. I can do update patch. Now patch allows me to just changes only the values in the recta body. So meaning that if I just give one key, if I just give my title, it's just going to change that value. It's not going to touch my genre and it's not going to touch my release here. It's just going to touch only what I pass it. Put means that it's going to make all the values match whatever's in my entire rec.body. So therefore, if I'm updating something, I have to give it everything, even if I'm not changing or editing it. I still have to give it all of the information. Patch is, I just have to give it whatever I want to change. That's what I'm giving it. But if
Well,
I'm just changing my title, then I'm just giving it my title.
I haven't really played with patch a whole lot. Will that still trigger validators?
It should. Yeah. Yeah.
But only only for the fields that you're sending.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I haven't had any issues with that. We can definitely test it. I would assume yes, because I haven't had any issues with it. And I usually use patch. So somebody said, so the user would only fill out one input and hit update. You can sort of think about it like, let's say that you had a Facebook profile and it was all clickable and you click the name and you just change the name right there. You're not changing everything else, right? You're just changing the name. Then only that is being updated, right? So it's not like you would have just a form that just has a name. If you're giving an entire form, then you want them to have the entire form, right? And you still have that information. That's where you would use a put. But let's say like one tool that I've used and that's really common is monday.com, where you can sort of track stuff and you just go in and rename something. oh, here's this, or I've added this, or I'm going to rename the title of this project. I'm not changing everything else within that project. I'm just changing the name. And so by having that functionality, it just patches and then it updates it. So now anywhere I go, that is now available, and it just updates that portion, not the entire page or the entire portion of that sort of request. Yeah, just like Paul said, maybe it's on different pages, but it's all tied to one account.
So
Okay.
isn't that something we could also, couldn't we control that in the specific function in the controllers? If we want to just change one piece of information.
What do you mean?
So like if yeah, in the controllers, if we have update.
Mhm.
So if we have find by ID and update, isn't there, because I was just doing like the MongoDB, like with the different queries. Can't we do something in there where it's specifying find this item and update this item instead of, like, I don't get why we're specifying that in the routes.
It's just a HTTP verb is what specifies the routes.
Mhm.
So based off of however you do it, this is generic, right? And so it goes, okay, this is a put request. So therefore, because of this type of request it is, this rec.body must have everything in there, or it sort of gets rid of everything and it just redoes this value. If it's a patch, right, this is agnostic to the methodology. This works with either one.
Okay.
It's just based off of whatever verb we use here, put or patch. So if it's patch, then the functionality works differently, obviously. And it takes this value and says, okay, I've got this rec.body, but because it's patch, just change specifically just this. But if it is a put, then it just inherently operates differently. Why they have both, I don't quite understand like the point of even put. Like I haven't had a good use case. Maybe Gray or Paul, you've got a good use case for using a put. I usually stick with patch because to me it is less breakable. Because I'm only just passing in whatever I need to pass in. And it's only
I
updating
actually
that.
haven't worked with patch, so we were mostly taught like put, but now just like I made a really good case for front end validations, I have to now consider patch. So
Yeah.
I may be changing that up. So
Yeah.
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 Same.
Play with both.
It's fun.
But I like this because I feel like if you're using put and then you're not passing in all the information, you can kind of get yourself messed up compared to here. If you just pass in the name, you're not going to delete the rest of your object or your document, right? You're not going to update that. You're just going to update the values that you passed in. So I feel like this is a little bit error sensitive, meaning you can make a little bit less errors with patch versus changing the entire thing with put. But try both, right? Philip, no, this is not for login. This is just if we are updating or if we're editing a TV show, we're editing anything that we're wanting to edit. It can be a user that we use to log in. Like we can absolutely do that. But
Yeah, that's what I meant. It's like you already signed up, you're logging in, you're putting in your wrong password or your wrong email,
Mhm.
and it like, well, no, you wouldn't change anything. Never mind, sorry.
Or you might change, like if you update that, that's actually a great example of what depends on what you're kind of doing, right? But if you forgot your password and you're just dealing with password, I might not want to pass in an entire new user object, or I don't want to update the entire user object. I just want to update the password, right? That's a great example of when patch would be a good use case because I don't need to pass in the user. I can still use put, right? I would still have to, but then I'd have to go get all the information, buy that ID, grab all that information, and then say, okay, now that I have all that information, here's the object. Now let's go in and edit. I could do that, or I could just use patch and update the password. But yeah, it would eventually become a Like if we're updating a password, we can use patch, but usually on like when we're sending some information in a login, what Paul is saying, then you'd use post because you're adding some information. You're sending some sensitive information over. Either one works. If you choose either one, then both will work a-okay. And then the last one is delete, which is just same sort of thing, right? App.delete, API/shows/ID, and then it is show controller delete show. Yeah, Isaiah, I'm kind of with you. I feel like put is extra work compared to patch. That's what I lean towards patch, but sometimes purists like to say put, but I haven't found a good use case. Or I haven't found something that really definitively says put over patch. So because of that, I use patch. But both work a-okay. Oh man, I'm just looking at the time. Okay. Let's test these real fast by using Postman. So let me CD into server. Okay, so I'm gonna say node-watch server.js. Establish a connection to the database. Perfect. Let me open up Postman. And then there's one other quick thing that I need to talk to you guys about, and then we are done for the night. Okay. So I've got this guy. We're going to change. So if I just go to shows, let's get all my shows. Cool. I have The Office, How I Met Your Mother, and Parks and Rec. And wait, 2 Parks and Recs. Nice. Okay, so let's change one of these, right? Let's say that I wanted, it looks like I just doubled up there. Let's say that I wanted to edit this and change it for, let's create a new show. Anybody have a show that's quick come to mind? Ted Lasso. Perfect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this guy and we're going to change it to Ted Lasso. So what we're going to pretend though, that Ted Lasso came out in 2007, just so that way we can see both, right? Or just so that way we can see that patch works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a new one and I'm going to do a patch of local host 8000 /API/shows/ this ID. Now my body, again, this is my rec.body that I'm sending over. So my body is a JSON. And then I'm going to say title is Ted Lasso. And we're going to say genre is heartwarming. It makes you feel good. Okay. So when I'm doing this, I'm going to have a couple pieces of information, right? Here is going to be within my request. I've got a body and I'm just taking title and genre. And we're doing that so that we can see that, hey, it's okay. We can use patch just to update 2 of these things. We're going to pretend that it's still 2007, right? So we're not updating all 3. We're just saying, hey, title, genre, those are different. We're taking the ID and then we're passing that over. So if I run this, let's see what happens. Cool. So I still get 2007. My created at is still yesterday. This is maybe UTC time zone. So it was off. But you can see that they're the same, they're a day apart. So I think this is UTC. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. UTC 7 hours ahead from where I'm at. And so these are, this is when it was created, same time yesterday, or I guess in 3 minutes, same time. And then now it's just been updated. But we see that we've got Ted Lasso, heartwarming, and this information will still stay the same. So now if I come and I refresh and send, we see, all right, The Office, Parks and Rec, Ted Lasso, and How I Met Your Mother. Cool. So we're able to just update a few of those things. The last thing we'll need to do is let's make a post request and let's just create a show that we're gonna cancel local host 8,000 / API / shows. Anybody have a show that they hate? I don't really have any shows that I hate.
Teletubbies.
Teletubbies. Oh, woof.
Even when I was a child. Ugh. Terrible.
Super
Terrible.
weird. It's a weird show. Like, you look back at it as an adult, you're like, this is weird.
Isaiah said a good one, The Bachelor.
Oh,
Or The
gosh.
Bachelorette. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Let me put myself on mute.
No, you're good. That's perfect. Release year, we're gonna say 1999. I don't know, we'll say. Okay. So localhost, or yeah, localhost 8,000 API shows. This is a post request. We pass in the information. Cool. We get it back, meaning that this worked perfectly. I come here and I use get. Now we see at the bottom, we're gonna have Teletubbies. Great. So let's go ahead and delete Teletubbies by passing in the ID. So we're gonna go here. We're gonna have a delete. And I say local host 8,000 / API / shows / the ID, right? And then now we just get, this is a status 200 okay. We get the value that we just deleted. That's our response. So now if I run this, I should not have Teletubbies anymore. Yeah, they're gone. The bad man is gone. So Krista asked, can we replace the ID the same way? So you would never replace the ID. The ID is something that you would stay with it. You'd never replace the ID on a value. Because oftentimes, like if you're dealing with some sort of data, that ID is connected to things, especially if you have past data. And so there's no way to associate the past data with your new data, or else there's like a whole bunch of issues. So the ID is something we just will always keep the same. As long as that record exists, that's its ID. Good question though. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about is cores. I'm not talking about the adult beverage. We've got a backend, right? And this is our server. We also have a server on our front end. So moving forward, what we will actually have is, we see how my server is running here. I will have a second window open, and Robert will work on this as well, where you actually have npm start. So you're going to have your client on one server and your backend on another server. So you're going to have two servers running at the same time because they're separate entities, right? Well, there is something called cross-origin, I can't remember. It's cross-origin resource sharing, which is CORS, that in browsers can prevent the two servers from speaking. CORS issues are things that constantly are, I mean, it's a constant issue amongst people. And especially if you're just like trying to build a front end application that, if you're trying to build a front end application, it's that like connects to a back end database, you can have CORS issues. So it's a whole bunch of issues there. So what we can do is, in order for them to talk, in order for them to, not that one, in order for them to communicate, right? I want to communicate across my different servers. Then what I need to do is I need to install this tool called CORS. Let's go find it. Yeah, npm install CORS. Now what this does is it allows us to make cross-origin requests, or just requests from one server to another, right? And so what we need to do is we need to install CORS. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, in my server, let me make this a little bit bigger for you guys. I'm going to say npm install CORS. Now you can do this whenever you do Mongo and Express. Say npm install CORS. Okay, perfect. That's there. Now, all I have to do in order for me to use it is go to my server.js. Okay. And then let's bring this side by side. Perfect. So now what I can do is I just need to add in cores by saying const cores equals require cores. And then after, and where this is okay. But this next line must be after our app is I can then say app dot use cores. I have to have that, right? I have to say app dot use cores after, because obviously app has to be established. And now because of this, we are able to make cross origin requests. Now it sounds silly. You're like, oh, it's just 2 lines, but it is a big, big deal. So we want to make sure that we can do that correctly. By adding in these 2 lines, it allows us to communicate amongst our 2 different servers and installing it, right? Making sure that it's installed.
And you only need it on one side, on the back
Mhm.
end?
You just need it on the
Okay.
back end. Just in there. And that's it. You have officially learned everything that is needed for, oh, I lost my code. For the belt exam. There we go. So that's officially everything you need for the belt exam. That's officially everything you need for the back end. Any questions? We are full stack fam. Absolutely. You guys have officially learned everything.
One day, we'll officially learn one day.
Any questions, friends? If you can do this, I know we've kind of gone a little bit slowly, but if you can do all of this, like if you can just take this information and replicate it, right? And by understanding it too, right? You have to you have to understand the code or else no bueno. But if you can do this, then you will be A-okay for the exam. A-okay. Just remember there's multiple ways to do it. If you just wanted to say module.exports.create show, you could have done that too. But I like to do it all in one object. Totally up to you.
Can you go to the routes?
Mhm.
So, see, I was just wondering, how do we, like, when we're implementing this into like an application or website, whatever,
Uh-huh.
how do we differentiate like patch and delete if they're using the same route?
So it's based off of like if we have it's Axios, right? So we're using Axios.
Okay.
So these 3, and this is sort of it's called oh Gray, Paul, what's it called? Oh my gosh. RESTful routing. Duh. It's where we can actually just do, because they're all the same. All 3 of these are the exact same thing. Right? I mean, excluding this one, obviously, but
Yeah.
This is the same route as this. It's the same route as this. The only thing that is different is the request type.
Mhm.
So whenever if we were having our front end, we're going to have something like Axios dot patch, Axios dot get, Axios dot delete, and Axios dot post, right? And so in this request, this is exactly what we're doing, right? We've set up our API. And let's pretend we're shows. If I ever want to do something like I want to create a show, I could say axios.post http localhost 8000/API/show. And then I pass in my form or whatever information. This is a request from the front end. It's going to come to our routes. It's going to come to our routes and it's going to find post. It's going to say, okay, this is a post, shows. Okay, cool. It had that information from that form. It goes in and it runs, can create show. Everything's good to go. It says, cool, I have this new show. So then it's going to come back here and then we are going to have a response and it's going to be that new show. So I could just console log it. So based off of the HTTP verb that you use, that's what differentiates and that's what controls sort of the functionality. So Axios will have a dot patch, a dot put, a dot delete, a dot post, and a dot get. All based off those HTTP verbs. And so because these are even because these are the same, right? They look the same, but they are different because this is, if I have a Axios dot delete, it's going to say that this is not a dot delete, even though the route is the same, the method or the request is not the same. So it's not going to, so this does not match. And it's going to find this one and say, this is a delete and this matches. So it's all based on the HTTP verb. And that is very common in practice, not just React, that is sort of everywhere. These are the verbs that you use, regardless of language.
Thank you.
Yeah. Does that make sense, Cameron?
Yes, I was getting stuck on routes being what we enter into the search bar or whatever. But so those aren't, that's the front end. It has its own routes that access Axios or whatever.
Yeah. So by default, whenever you do this, it's a get request.
Mm-hmm.
So like routes, whenever you search or default get request, looks, Paul and I had the same thought. Their get request, you're always just saying a dot get. Now you don't say dot get, right? But by default, it's always a dot get anytime. But if I have a website that I fill out a form on our back end, we're going to do an Axios.post. Or if my user wants to update their name, we can use an Axios.patch and pass in the information. Or if they want to delete their profile, we say Axios.delete. So it's just fully based off of this method right here, or whatever HTTP verb or method that they use.
And we're going to start doing that like next week, right? Like we're going to start kind of going into that.
Yep. So next
To
week,
kind
what
of-
you'll
yeah.
do is you'll have a wireframe that looks very similar to the belt exam. You guys will start building it out in the back end. Sorry. You'll build it out in the back end. You're going to build just like this. So you'll build out this entire thing day one. And then the next day you will build out the front end. Okay, here's my components. Here's how this is going to look. And then you're going to connect the two, right? And
Cool.
all we're doing, again, from a high level, you guys have done this before in the same way that I saw that in office hour, we were calling the API to get information for Luke Skywalker. We're doing the exact same thing. We're just calling our own API, right? We're just saying, hey, here's my request. But instead of saying to swappy.dev/people, we're saying to localhost 8000/API/shows or person or whatever we are building. I think we're building a player. We're building a version that's modified from Team Manager. So we're not building this because this isn't necessary for your exam. We're taking some of the base stuff here and then building this out. So yeah, we'll start doing that next week. And it really is just, hey, we're making a request. It's going to hit our routes. Our routes goes to our controllers. And then we say, okay, great. Do I need to communicate with Mongo? I do. It gives me some information back. And then I give that information back to my user. And then they do whatever they want with it. They have that response. It's just putting everything we've learned together. We have that Axios response. Okay, cool. I now have created that user. What do I want to do with it? Do I just want to console log it? Do I then want to navigate somewhere else and navigate to that page? Right? Because if I've got, if you think about it, if I'm creating a show, whenever we get a show back, we get all this information, right? Well, I'm also going to have this guy right here as part of my information. So what I could do is I could just then, once this is created, if I'm in a dot then, meaning, hey, things are okay, then I could just use navigate and navigate to API/shows/ID. And I put in the ID that we get from our response. So then it'll navigate to the component that has that information. We'll use a use effect. We'll call our database again, grab all the information from that specific show, and then we'll show that on our page. Yeah, it's just like it does have a dashboard. This is what you will be building next week. So you're going to have a team manager. This is what we're calling it. And this is what you're building. So it's not like I'm showing you something secret. So you're going to have something that's getting all of your players that you can delete if you wanted. These players are going to be links that if you click on it, it goes to a player dashboard that has the player's name, preferred position, and then game 1, game 2, game 3 status that I think by default I set them as undecided. If I want to edit the player, it goes to that page and then they can edit name and preferred position. You can pre-populate it as like a bonus. If you've taken an exam before, you know that the different color sticky notes often indicate different functionalities and different belts. Cough, cough. One's a little bit darker. So maybe, you know, do with that what you will. I try to help you guys out as much as I can. And then you also need to be able to create a player where you have validations. So different validations. So name must be greater than 2 characters. Preferred position must be greater than 2 characters. And as a bonus, handle validations on the back end is going to be required. But what if you were also able to handle it on the front end? Wow. That would be some advanced stuff. I would say that you would be pretty advanced if that was the case. That's all I'm giving you. For those of you that stuck around, I really do try to help. I think it's a big win. So yeah, this is what you guys are going to be building. And this is wildly similar to your exam. Just with the same functionality. It's not like I'm not going to give you the same exact exam, obviously, because that'd be kind of silly. What would be the point? But pretty close. Yeah, Philip, it's pretty confusing. Can't figure anything out. So cool. All right, guys, we are 20 minutes over. I want to be cautious of your time. This is the longest I've gone. So are there any questions? I know we just had to talk about a lot since it's my last time with you guys before the belt. Any questions, friends?
I'm good. Have a good week. We'll miss you.
Yeah. Have so much fun, guys. Have a good week. You guys can do it. I promise you will crush it.